The New Orleans Pelicans finished the season 49-33. We're actually the seventh seed, but because of the play-in tournament, they lost in the first round of the play-in tournament to the Lakers, and then won their next game. They ended up as the eighth seed, and then got swept by the OKC Thunder. Part of that because Zion Williamson, who was pretty healthy last year, let me check here. He played 70 games, which is like unheard of for Zion, but missed all the playoff games. As a matter of fact, he's actually missed every playoff game New Orleans has been a part of in his 5-year career. Like that's kind of concerning and kind of is the litmus test for how New Orleans goes every year, and that will be the case this year too. If Zion is healthy and Brandon Ingram is healthy, New Orleans can go pretty good into the playoffs, pretty deep. I think they could get a second round appearance if they really put it all together because there is a good amount of talent. There is still Zion, Brandon Ingram. There's still CJ McCollum. They do have some solid pieces around them in terms of Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. They also traded for DeJounte Murray during the offseason. He should, in theory, help. It's not a perfect fit, I will say, because in DeJounte Murray, you now have a starting backcourt that is really small with him and CJ McCollum. You now have yet another guy who needs the ball in his hands to be effective. There are questions I still have about his 3-point shooting, which was better last season, but I need to see it as like a continual every year type of deal with him. And you put that around the rest of the New Orleans core. Now, I'll say for the New Orleans core, speaking of which, it's pretty solid, at least as the front six, and maybe front seven if you want to count Trey Murphy, because you have CJ, DeJounte Murray, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, Daniel Tice. And then you have Trey Murphy. That's a pretty solid seven. Now, you have to figure out who starts among that 7-man core. I have to imagine Zion and Brandon Ingram start. Does CJ come off the bench? Does Tice come off the bench? If Tice comes off the bench, you don't have a true center. I know there's conversation about like Herb at center. I don't love that as far as being a full time center. Zion as a center means you don't get a lot of shot blocking and defense. That's not really great. So I assume Tice will start the season. Then there's Trey Murphy, who deserves some look. He was injured, Trey Murphy was, for a good part of last year, but did show a lot of improvement overall. And, he's it's worth the consideration with him. But again, the question becomes who among that seven starts? I don't think you want Herb Jones off the bench. He's your best defender. And you look at the New Orleans like seven that I just described, five of them are bad defensively, like utterly like it's concerning. You have the two guys who are good as DeJounte Murray and Herb Jones, and like Murphy, I guess is okay. So four of them, not great defensively. So you have to figure out what makes sense in terms of do you want three guys in your starting lineup who can't shoot, three guys in your starting lineup who can't defend, an undersized lineup, and even with Tice as the center, he is 6'9". He is getting older. How old is he? Tice is 32 years old, and he's bounced in and out of the league. So if he's your starting center, you're not going to go very far as playoff success. So what do you do there? But I just don't. I don't know. There are holes as far as like the when you get to the end of the bench as far as depth. Like this team is gonna have to rely on Jeremiah Robinson Earl to play meaningful center minutes because there's no good center on the roster outside of like Tice or small ball five or now Robinson Earl, who I don't think is a particularly good player, but they don't really have centers. They don't really have a lot of height and size. A lot of that got traded away or lost. They lost Valanciunas to the Wizards. They lost Dyson Daniels, who was a big guard, to Atlanta in the DeJounte Murray trade. They also lost Larry Nance in that trade, and he was huge for New Orleans. And now that's some size that's out the window. So this is going to be a very awkward year for New Orleans. I should also mention they are right below the second apron, so making trades is really difficult. They do have their first round pick, and they actually have a uh, five to top four. It's functionally a top four protected pick from Milwaukee. That if it's as long as it's not in the top four, they get it. Because if it's in the top four, it actually goes to Brooklyn. But that's a tangent. Sorry. But what was I saying? Yeah, so they do have assets that they can certainly trade to try and upgrade. But if they're going to upgrade, it definitely has to be some level of two-way player. It's got to be a center, at least one center, and then go from there. Because otherwise, if you don't get far in the playoffs with this team, Brandon Ingram is unhappy. He has not gotten an extension. He missed voluntary workouts. He wasn't part of the Olympics this year. And I have to think that he thinks he's owed a lot of money, but if you look at his actual like caliber of player, he's good. Like, he's an all-star caliber guy, but he needs the ball in his hands. And his defense has not been at the level it needs to be. Plus, he's very mid-range heavy when really he needs to be shooting more threes, especially with Zion on the floor. It's a mismatch. And I look at New Orleans like as far as like overall all outlook. I think seventh seed, eighth seed is the realm. Maybe they can sneak into that top six. Maybe they fall below or below into like the play-in or below that. I think play-in is like the floor, but really you have to figure out the ball handling. Who has the ball between Murray, McCollum, Zion, Ingram? Murphy's probably going to want a lot of touches. You have to figure out that. You have to figure out the rebounding. You have to figure out the defense. You have to figure out the shooting. Pieces are there. It's just for Willie Green as the coach, you have to make them fit. I will say Willie Green, he's been solid. One thing that concerned me when I was looking it up, the Pelicans were actually really bad. They're great as a first half team, but second halves are pretty bad, and they are actually 0-22 when with a lead with the deficit in the fourth quarter. He's got to clean that up too, and if you do that, you get a few more wins, and then who knows? Again, like I think the summation of this video is there are pieces there. They certainly have the offensive talent, and if they can outscore teams, they can be good, but you got to figure out the defense, the shooting, the rebounding, and that's a lot to figure out in one year.